Welcome to another episode of the Pennock Knockdown, a podcast where we unpack key strategies and tactics for digital marketing leaders. I've got a special guest with us today. We've got Jessica Sikora. She's the founder of Superbands. Um, it's a nonprofit transforming music fandom into a force for youth mental wellness. Growing up, Jessica turned to lyrics when she didn't have the words for what she was feeling. That connection, raw, emotional, and real, became the foundation for Superbands, a platform that uses storytelling, fan culture, and creative tools to help young people feel seen, supported, and less alone. With a passion for amplifying impacts to change the stigma of mental health, Jessica leads with both strategic vision and lived experience. Her work is rooted in the belief that fandom isn't just about loving music, it's about finding belonging, connection, and healing through it. Jessica, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I know I just kind of read through your bio there, but would love to kind of understand what you were doing before Superbands that led you to creating this nonprofit.
Yeah, so I guess my disclaimer is that I never set out to start a nonprofit. I'm not quite sure that anyone really does. It is a very challenging world to kind of jump into. But I definitely felt called to it after college. I think when I graduated college and moved back into my parents' house and moved back to sharing walls with my younger siblings, I think something within that sparked this whole kind of lockdown memory lane for me where I remembered how obsessed I was really with my favorite bands and my favorite songs. My sister is 10 years younger than I am, and at the time she was 13, obsessing over her favorite bands. She would cry over their video interviews, and most people from the outside looking in would say like this girl is crazy, what's wrong with her? But I got it. Like I really understood it because I lived that too. So again, kind of went back to memory lane and I kind of thought about myself as 13-year-old Jessica again and remembered how music was such a big impact in my life. And while I was trying to figure out what it was that I wanted to do next in my life post college, this idea for Superbands really came about. I felt like at the time, or when I was 13, I didn't feel like there was really a community to turn to as someone who was obsessed with music and this love for a favorite band. I found community through going to concerts or, posting on like YouTube or whatever the platform was at the time, posting on like videos, posting comments and sharing my love for, certain lyrics that really spoke to me, blogging and things like that. But how do you connect fans beyond that and encourage them and empower them just like the music that they love empowers them? So Superbands kind of came about and, having zero business experience, I kind of just dove in and Googled everything I could and tried to learn as much as I could about what it takes to start a nonprofit. And admittedly, took a lot of wrong turns along the way. But, Superbands has kind of evolved over the past several years into what I like to think of as like a powerful force of mental wellness and connection, all centered around helping young people feel like they didn't have to be alone. But yes, again, never really set out for this path, but I think it kind of found me.
Yeah, I love it. So, walk the listeners through the platform a little bit. So, let's just pretend I'm, Nikki, I'm a 13-year-old myself and, really want to take my fandom to the next level, plus use it to leverage lyrics, again, like you said, to maybe describe some of what I'm going through as a teenager.
Yeah, so I think when I first started Superbands, I thought I was going to be in crisis response. I knew that a lot of young people needed that, immediate mental attention. What can we do to help them? And I think that's kind of where I got stuck with Superbands for so long. I felt like I was obligated to offer this type of resource or this type of support, but I was kind of stepping into this unknown territory and territory that I quite was or quite honestly wasn't equipped to handle. I'm not a mental health therapist or a therapist by any means. I'm not a mental health professional. So I got stuck in this kind of rabbit hole of how do I provide people the support that they need without that type of certification or education. And I had this sort of breakthrough, I guess, where I really sat down with myself and I said, but what am I an expert at? I'm not an expert in mental health, but I am an expert at being a teenage fan that loves music. So I focused on that. So Superbands, like I said, has kind of evolved over the years, but now with this newfound focus on looking at things through the fans lens, we've started to offer other means of support by helping fans take charge of their mental wellness before they get to the point of crisis. So, giving them outlets to share their story, giving them opportunities to empower one another, giving them opportunities to connect with one another outside of concerts in a safe and protected space. Whether it's sharing, affirmation cards with lyrics from their favorite artists or giving them opportunities for their voices and stories to be heard and to be seen. Um, Really just uplifting them and giving them somewhere where they don't have to feel alone and they don't have to feel like their voice doesn't matter has been our newest trajectory. And I think that that's made the most waves out of, all of the business models that we've kind of tried over the years.
So is the average user coming to this site, I assume, like, creating a profile, maybe, like, connecting with some people? Are they there, like, actively participating and leaving their affirmations or lyrics or what have you? Or is there, like, a decent amount of people who are just there to, like, receive the support and be a little bit more of a passive member?
I would say it's the former. I think there are a lot of people who are jumping in and sharing their stories. I think what helps is, and I'm sure anyone can attest to this, is social media. That when you see that kind of social proof, you're seeing other people commenting, you feel kind of empowered to do the same and share your own story or reply to other people's comments, reply to other people's posts. That's been, I think, the biggest way of getting people to step outside of that comfort zone. And I think also sitting behind a screen helps, right? You don't have to get in front of an audience or get in front of a mic to share your story. You can do so from like the comfort of your bed, but using your phone.
I love it. Okay, great. Thank you for taking a minute to talk through the user's experience in the use case. I'd like to kind of flip back to some of your stories. So, how have you shaped your stories to turn them into marketing strategies?
Like I said, I think, you know, taking a look at myself and really stepping back, and realizing, I could provide value to my audience through my own experience. So I think I had to get very real with myself and not be afraid to be vulnerable and to share my own story. I think a lot of people that I went to school with would actually told me that they were surprised to hear that I struggled with depression and suicidal ideations as a teenager because I never was very upfront about it. So it has to be something that, me sharing my story had to be that catalyst for the rest of the organization to kind of evolve. So sharing my story openly, saying, hey, it's okay because I lived through it and I'm here to share my story so that you can get through it too, has been, I think, like the biggest catalyst for us. And for me, honestly, as a leader, by sharing my story, it's also allowed me to figure out what is the next step. How do we help fans beyond what's readily accessible to them, what schools are offering, what parents are offering. How can we do it in a space where kids honestly are constantly, when they're not at school, they're online, they're on social media, they're on, or like different YouTube videos or forums. So, really meeting teenagers where they're at and kind of speaking that language through music has been critical.
Yeah. I mean, you just called out some trigger things, right? You talked about depression, you talked about suicidal thoughts. And so I'm imagining on the platform, you're exposed to some of these, every time you're working. How do you keep yourself sane? I mean, I personally worked with a company that was in the prenatal space, and half of what we dealt with was people who kept having, miscarriages and, losing their pregnancy. And so I kind of felt like I could find myself in this funk of just like, the doom scroll of just like, oh gosh, this is like so rough for everybody. How do you keep positive and keep your cool and get through your workflow with the topics you're addressing with these teens?
Yeah, I totally get it. I mean, with every good day comes a bunch of bad days, right? Where you have the ups and downs, and then you have the hard stories. And quite frankly, as someone who lived through it myself, it can be triggering. It can make me feel like, oh my gosh, I know exactly what you feel like or what you're going through, and feel that sense of panic. I honestly have just been someone who has had to take charge of my mental wellness as well, right? Like, get really true reality checks, really being able to step away from the screen as much as I can, relying on an incredible board of directors, great advisors, great mentors to be able to talk through it, I think has been critical. And of course, given the sensitivity of a bunch of different topics that I could be exposed to, as well as others could be exposed to, also aligning myself with mental health professionals and making sure that, we're continuing to look forward and focus on, like, the positive stories and the things that we can do to help.
Yep, that makes sense. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about Superbands, maybe as a product or maybe something inside of it as a product. But do you think it's possible for every product to have a story?
Yes, I genuinely believe that. I think that's the heart of being able to sell something and being able to, um, get an audience, get customers, get clients, whatever it may be. I think a story is critical. I think there's a lot of stuff out there, and we're very oversaturated with the amount of things being thrown at us on a regular basis, whether it's a service, if it's a product. I think it's very overwhelming. I think people are very attuned now to what is, BS and what is not, and what is truly authentic. I will say, even from my own experience, when I first started Superbands, I some of the most early feedback was, why would I entertain someone like you? I don't know you. You kind of just came to me out of the blue. But looking back on it and asking the people who now partner with me and the organizations and brands that we do work with, I gave you a chance because I liked your story. I liked working with you. So I think really stripping back on, like, the buzzwords, all of, like, the flashy graphics and things, like, that's great and all, but if you don't have a story at the end of the day, people aren't compelled to give you a chance. And if you can resonate with someone emotionally and really connect with them on that human level, anything is marketable.
Yes, I love it. And you kind of tied back into your story a little bit there. I want to dissect that for a second because I do think some founders, really are the identity of their business, whether it's a product, a physical product, whether or not it's like, nonprofit like you've got. How do you kind of like balance, and what's your recommendation for best practice to like ingest the personal story versus kind of like have a brand story?
No, yeah, it definitely is a challenge, and I'm certainly no expert. I think that a lot of it, to your point, is very heavily intertwined with me. I can't necessarily just step away and say, "Here, somebody else take this," because at the heart of it is my story. That's the origin of where this came from. All of the initial failures and milestones were which were aligned to my own personal story. So I think for me, I think I have been able to develop myself as a personal brand and understand what are my, different pillars that make me me, whether it is a portion of it is talking about, running a nonprofit, being a founder, struggling with mental health, other things like being a mom, things that I like to do, like being a storyteller, but also knowing who Superbands is as a brand and having that North Star, and also having, like, people to keep you in line, right? Keep you in check, whether it's advisors or board members, helping you stay aligned to that true path with the milestones and the goals that you set out was really, really helpful.
Yeah, that that sounds really, really meaningful through all of this. Is just having those advisors and board members to go to kind of keep you focused on the path. So appreciate all of the comments, and that one really stuck for me. Um, when we talk about brands that are utilizing storytelling well, do you have any examples of maybe like household name big brands that you think do this well that we could all kind of like relate to?
Yeah, I think I get really annoying with this, whether it's with my team or like those people that I work with. I always, always, always say Ben and Jerry's is one of my favorite brands. Personally, I'm not the biggest ice cream fan anymore, so don't tell them that. But I think Ben and Jerry's does an exceptional job at not just having a killer product that has a bunch of variety and really tries to accommodate different taste buds and like, different people, but the fact that they can not only have an incredible product, but they have such a strong activism in regards to the types of causes that they care about. They really fight hard for the things that their team and their company values. And they also don't shy away from some of the more sensitive topics or sensitive campaigns that maybe some people might be afraid to speak up about. Ben and Jerry's never shies away from it, and I think because of that, and they're so unapologetically themselves, they have such a great fan base and they have a great customer base, and I will continue cheering them on for forever. I think another, 2 other ones, which unfortunately for them do not compare to Ben and Jerry's. I really love Dove's Real Beauty campaign. I know that that one's it's kind of dated at this point, but honestly, they were one of the first brands, at least to my knowledge, that really shifted an entire industry where in this whole age of photoshopping and, different the true standard of beauty for bodies, Dove did not, miss a beat when they kind of tapped into the vulnerability of the beauty industry and really shared unedited, unfiltered, raw images of women. Their models were different sizes and different skin colors, and we all look different. I think it really celebrated beauty in a different way. And even to this day, we see other brands kind of following suit, but Dove really stepped into the spotlight for that one. And honestly, they took a chance and they changed the industry. And then lastly, I definitely love Duolingo. I think they can be very silly sometimes, um, but I love how their content is very character driven. They know how to tap into trends very quickly. They know what works. They are very good at knowing what works and leaning into it. And I think they're a good example of how a brand can be playful and fun, but still know how to market themselves effortlessly.
Yeah, those are really, really good examples. Um, as a leader of a marketing agency, I've got to move into the marketing topics next. So I'd love to understand some of the campaigns or initiatives that you've been involved in that maybe worked exceptionally well, and maybe even an example of something that didn't go well at all.
Yeah, so I would say that, in terms of something that went well, was a recent campaign that was held for Mental Health Awareness Month. We partnered with a record label that we really admire, and we worked with them kind of in tandem to feature bands and artists who were open and vulnerable about prioritizing mental health, really showcasing it's okay to feel the need to raise your hand for help, giving people opportunities to share their stories about mental health, what lyrics got them through hard times. And in addition to that, because we were partnering with the record label and those bands and artists, we were able to kind of tap into their fan bases and, bring them positive content that resonated with them, whether it was lyrics or affirmation cards and even, giveaways with, their favorite artists. So honestly, the campaign is called Loud and Clear because we wanted to make sure that people put mental health at the forefront. It isn't just a 1 month long thing to care about. It's all year long. And the hope was that it would strike emotion, right? Fans were not just encouraged to consume the content, but they were encouraged to be part of it. Share your story. Tell us what songs got you through hard times. Building those playlists so other people could listen to these, empowering songs. So I think that idea of co-creation was really powerful. You know, Obviously tapping into their favorite artists helped as well, where they felt empowered and, they wanted to be part of a movement, but also keeping true to that emotional bond. So I think that that was really critical for us, where, again, kind of leaning back on our roots of, how do we tap into emotion? How do we make people feel like they can, feel they can express themselves vulnerably without, feeling judged. That was definitely something that was important, and I think, based on that campaign, obviously it was quite recent. However, that isn't to say that all of our campaigns have been impactful, especially when we first started. Our business model was so different, and I also didn't know anything about marketing or nonprofit programming, and I kind of just took a shot in the dark, and I've created campaigns where we got, like, 0 submissions for stories, or, "Send us your favorite lyric," and got, like, 1 lyric, and it was from, like, somebody that I knew. Um because they probably felt bad. I think it's, a matter of testing things on a smaller scale and then seeing what works, what isn't working before kind of building around that and making things bigger. So I think because Superbands has now evolved since those initial, touch points, we've been able to build campaigns that we know resonate. We've been able to work with brands or organizations that can kind of help us be a little bit more amplified in a pretty oversaturated space as well. And also not being afraid to be vulnerable has been really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love recognizing for a moment that the mental health month campaign or Clear and Loud was in partnership with the record label, as you mentioned. And I just think like collaborations and any kind of ways to get multiple parties involved help so, so much. And I know you'd shared before we hit record some of the stats around just how compelling that was from a organic reach perspective, as well as just engagement rate being like through the roof. So awesome, awesome to have such great stats on something that you probably spent a lot of time preparing for. What do you think customers and viewers are looking for from brands?
I think kind of tapping into some of the things that I had mentioned previously and some of the brands that I mentioned that I think are doing a good job in this space. I think you need to be incredibly authentic. I think people can sniff out what's fake and what's not. We are all getting very keen with our senses in terms of sniffing out what works and what doesn't. I think people care about real people, real stories. They want to have real, meaningful connections. So I think the authenticity is a big one. If not, if it's not the first, then it's one of the first things that, brands should be incredibly mindful of. I think very aligned to Ben and Jerry's. There are a lot of brands who are taking a stand for the causes that they care about, and they're showing up for their communities in meaningful ways. Um, I guess like another example of something that maybe, you don't have to be as prominent in activism as Ben and Jerry's is. A simple company like, let's say, Oatly is, is taking a stand against like, the dairy industry. You're trying to just give people a cause to care about and to stand behind, and brands that do that are being incredibly like are being celebrated and being admired for what they're doing. I think, and I'm incredibly guilty of this, is I always want things to be perfect. I want things to be polished. I spend hours in like combing over things. I think when you're so obsessively waiting for something to be perfect, you end up being delayed, which is why I think Duolingo does such an incredible job. They are very fast to act, so they're very on trend all the time. I think for myself, I'm too busy polishing things up that sometimes the moment passes, the trend is gone. the meaning of, some sort of story or cause is a little bit diluted. So I think focusing less on perfection and focusing more on, like, that emotion and that connection, is so important because people wanna feel something and feel like they're a part of something. But I would definitely give those 3 things as, my top 3.
Yeah, that's a really good list. We're about to kind of hit wrap up on the recording here. I'd love to know as we part ways here, what advice you would give yourself if you were to start all over again with Superbands, coming out of school, and any tips you would give yourself for your earlier days.
Yeah, I think the biggest one is that, and I say this now all the time, is your story is your superpower. I think, like I said, it took me so long to feel comfortable to open up and share some of the hardest days of my life with essentially the entire world and saying, hey, I struggled and you don't have to. That was really hard for me to get to. And I think that is what held me back. So I think using your own story, being authentically yourself and just showing up is critical, and I wish I would have known that sooner. And then again, like, I think I am a perfectionist, at heart, but I think you'll never feel ready, so don't ever wait to feel ready, because you never will. So just jump in, you'll learn, as you go, you'll make mistakes, but that's okay. And you become ready by actually just jumping in and doing it. Um, and I think I also am just naturally a people pleaser, so I think, feeling like I needed to ask for permission or make everyone like me, it doesn't matter. The right people will come if you're authentic, you share your story, and you're just unapologetically yourself. The right people will be there, so you don't need to be everything to everyone. And I guess, like, the last thing, and this is so cliche, is, like, to just not give up. I think I've tried to give up on Superbands many times, but there's always something that's called me back, and every time I tell myself, "I just need one more shot. I'm gonna give it just one more year," something incredible happens, or somebody that I admired, reaches back out, and it always reminds me that, you might be so close to this breakthrough and not even know it. So,
Mhm.
I guess just keep going even when it's hard.
That's really good advice. I love it. Okay, so as we wrap, people are probably going to want to check you out and check out the nonprofit. Where can they go to find more?
Yeah, so you can follow, along on, like, the super binge journey. We're pretty active. For the most part, honestly, we've been very active on LinkedIn, sharing a lot of, emotional, real content, on the Superman's LinkedIn page, as well as our Instagram page where, our campaigns are typically hosted where we collaborate with our other partners. And I'm also quite active on, LinkedIn. So for myself, at JD Sikora for LinkedIn, and for Superbands, it's Superbands with an underscore at the end. So SUPERBANDS_. You can find us on Instagram or LinkedIn.
Wonderful. Well, Jessica, it was really, really fun to chat today. Love what you're doing. I think it's probably making a really great impact on the youth who need it most. So, really appreciate everything you're up to and the time you gave us today.
Thanks so much for your time, Nikki. Appreciate it.
Thank you.